This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
Unnecessarily, I will tell you we are back because it's obvious that we are. I am Kevin Randle, and this is A Different Perspective. We are broadcasting live and in color for those of you who are interested in that sort of thing. I am joined today by Francis Ridge, who is in the process of moving. So he has my great sympathy for that. He hosts the NICAP website, and we're going to ask him how he ended up as the NICAP website host here. But so that you know something about him, he headed a 7-man investigative team for Indiana for NICAP, and was designated, I guess, Indiana Unit Number 1. In 1972, he accepted the position of State Section Director for MUFON in Hillsborough, Illinois, and continued geographical studies in a 9-state area within the ODR project. And we'll find out what the ODR project is. I would have told you if I'd have known. In 1973, he set up a research and investigation team under MUFON as a state section director for Posey, Vandenberg, and Gibson counties. Thank God I could pronounce all those names. He continued this. It's actually the GDR project. I don't know where the ODR came from. The GDR project until the end of the year, which included a massive 1973 sighting wave, which had an awful lot of occupant sightings for those of you who were paying attention. He set up the Saucer Grapevine with scattered observers, police and sheriff and state police, airport controllers, and civil defense people in a tri-county area with a monthly bulletin and published a telephone number and media coverage directory for all of that. The station was designated as a UFO filter center. He obtained his first computer in 1986, and I bet that was really a crappy computer, because I obtained one about that time, and it what always cracks me up, it had 64K of memory, and my computer now plays music at 128K per second. So you can imagine there wasn't much memory there, and I have, of course, degenerated into another nonsensical rant about something here. He continued to work with his computer for a database which listed over 4,000 entries for the regions covering Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. You left out Iowa, you creep. No, I didn't mean that. Became Indiana's MUFON state director and a field investigator for the Center for UFO Studies, set up state section directors, and trained and tested 150 potential field investigators in Indiana's 92 counties. The Indiana Group Rapid Deployment Team consisted of approximately 30 active field investigators throughout the period, and he investigated hundreds of cases. He reopened the Mantell case in January 1974, completed a report in his book in 2008 with the help of Jean, and her last name is pronounced how?
I believe it was Skiewicz.
Okay. Dan Wilson and Brad Sparks. 2 years later, he wrote the report on the reinvestigation, the Mantell incident, the anatomy of investigation, a 60-year-old cover-up. And I welcome Francis Ridge, whom I have now taken up most of the first segment talking about. Francis, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. And you know I'd rather be here than anywhere else.
Absolutely, because we just are a lot of fun. And we have, no, we won't say that. Anyway, we are a lot of fun. We've only got like 2 minutes left before we have to take our first break. And a question came up talking to Rob McConnell about this. He said he thought NICAP was defunct and was surprised when I was talking about NICAP here. What's the story behind the, I think it's www.nycap.org.com. What's the, .org, forget the .com part. What's the story behind the website quickly? How is it affiliated with NICAP? How did you end up with it?
Well, it was kind of crazy. I was, really into NICAP earlier, and I felt like, why isn't NICAP being represented in the web or on the web and with all the information that they had collected? And I was sort of like a guy that was doing a lot out in the field, but I wasn't very well known. So when I got into doing computer work and doing a lot of emails and web work, I decided to set up the site, and there was a lot of resistance because they didn't know who I was. So I put up what I call the NICAP interlink, and what it was a NICAP homepage, and then it linked to a lot of the good cases, but it wasn't typically a NICAP site. Well, it was a NICAP site, but it was just a forerunner of it.
Well, let me break in here. Let me break in here to say we're going to have to take that break that I keep bragging about.
Cool.
The website is www.nycap.org, and you can access that. And more information will be here at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. We will be back right after this, so please stick around.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Is it science or is it magic? Once a magical thing has been scientifically proven, is it no longer magic? Or is magic simply the science of tomorrow? Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, on The Science of Magic, a syndicated radio program dedicated to combining the science and magic of today's dynamic and controversial topics to co-create new solutions. By triangulating information from today's leading experts from the scientific and magical fields, we uncover expansive and evolutionary truths you won't find anywhere else. Join us daily on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, as I interview the share thoughts with the amazing guests from both science and magic. The resulting knowledge is unprecedented. As a gift to you, the listener, past episodes can be accessed on our website free of charge at thescienceofmagic.net.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
As I promised just moments ago, we would come back with Francis Ridge, and we have come back, and Francis Ridge is still here with me. I don't know why he hasn't hung up and stomped off in anger, but he's here. The question that we were talking about was this NICAP organization. I mean, the NICAP president's on the web, and what I guess I was interested in is NICAP was an organization that began in the 1950s with Don Kehoe, and their mission seemed to be to inspire congressional investigations into UFOs and basically accuse the Air Force of hiding information. It went defunct in, I guess, the mid-1980s, or around that time. So you have use of the NICAP name. I assume that you have permission to do that. How did all that come about?
Well, we got permission from the people that actually own the rights, and that's CUFOs. And once we proved that we were going to do something worthwhile, and all my heroes were working with me, it was just unbelievable. I mean, one at a time, we would get different people that would help support us, and they were a lot of them were reluctant because here a person was getting involved in a NICAP site, and there's been 2 or 3 people tried to do that with different NICAP sites, and they were terrible. So, they were a little leery about it. But once they found out that I was serious about what I was doing and that my ideas were going to work, and started getting a lot of support. And then I set up the A-Team, which has got about 32, 33 people, all my heroes again. And it's been one heck of a ride. We've been very, very busy. We're all getting older, so.
Do you investigate? Does NICAP there investigate UFO sightings? Do you do that, or you just collect information?
We just collect information, but we're also trying to be in a position where if somebody calls, and they do, we get the report to the right people or get the sighting to the right people. But we're not having much luck with that.
Well, what's interesting, not that long ago, and the reason I hesitated, I was trying to think, was a week ago or 10 days ago, something like that, you had sent out an email, I guess, to the A-Team, which asked about a specific sighting that took place in May of 1954 in Clovis, New Mexico. And it was supposedly one of the Blue Book unknowns, unidentified, that Brad Sparks had in his big listing. Yeah. And I took a look at that, and it became a posting on my blog. Boy, I'm just having trouble with thinking of anything today. Posting on my blog about our research. It's sort of a chasing footnotes type thing. And the blog, of course, is www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. And we chased down that sighting and found out that the original sighting we were looking for probably didn't exist in Clovis, New Mexico, but there was one from Oceanside, California in a few days earlier that was a very interesting site and was a Project Blue Book unknown. Does that sort of thing happen frequently, or is that just something that was kind of a bizarre situation because of that specific sighting and where it went?
That was sort of a little bizarre, but we do run into all kinds of weird stuff. We'll be looking for one thing and find something else, and in some cases you're looking at what was originally listed as a Blue Book unknown, and maybe there's a newspaper clipping in there, and it's not worth pursuing. You wonder why they even considered it a Blue Book unknown.
Well, the original posting that you sent out was from Clovis, New Mexico, about two guys seeing a disc-shaped craft hovering over railroad tracks.
Yeah, and the reason why I went after that was because we had something that is indelible in my mind in 1973 during that massive sighting wave, right about the time of the coin case and the Pascagoula incident.
Well, let's just, for those that don't know, the coin case is the Coin Parker abduction case from Pascagoula in October of 1973. So people have a reference for that. So you were looking at something that related to that, or the wave of 1973, and it brought this up.
Yeah, it was a phone call on a Saturday morning that my wife took, and I was at work, and she called me and she said, "Man, you got to get home and call this guy back. Is a conductor from the L&N Railroad that had an incident this morning." And I actually couldn't wait to get home and call the guy, and he described this incident where the train was stopped. An object was following the train, and they thought it was another train. That's what they thought it was, because they could see the light. The conductors in the back could see the light following them. But they were loaded down with coal, and they were having a little bit of trouble lumbering into Evansville, and had to come up on this tall hill called Belknap Hill, and they had an engine overheat and had to stop, and the signals on the track were telling them that there was a train behind them, or something was behind them, and when the object backed up, the train signals reversed, indicating that the train was backing up, and they were able to restart the engine and go up the hill and make it on into Evansville. But they
this was
in
1973, right?
Yes, and
Okay.
it was an incident where the UFO actually caused the blocking system to show something was on the track or near the, interfering with the electronics of the blocking signal. And it's one thing for this to happen, but it's another thing for it to happen during a massive sighting wave where, if you grasped the two, you could say, well, there's something really strange going on in this county as well as the rest of the world, And
So you investigated this sighting from 1973?
yes, I was on top of it the instant, the day that it happened. So it wasn't hearsay, and
You talked to the people involved,
yes.
and what did you conclude?
We concluded that something was following the train and it was affecting the diesel, which, as we were always told that diesels were unaffected. In fact, there was one case where a diesel and a conventional tractor were overflown by UFO, and it affected the conventional but didn't affect the diesel. So we were assuming that this was an attempt. It didn't quite work, but it was yet an attempt to stop a diesel vehicle. And make a long story short, we found out from some friends of mine who were accident investigators that this train was taken down to Alabama and investigated by the Air Force.
Did you ever find any file on it from the Air Force?
No,
or
never did.
we don't know what organization would have investigated it, or?
No. But ever since then, anytime I find a case that involves railroad tracks or trains, we make a list of those, make an actual file on the site, and that was the reason why I was more interested in that than I normally would have been. Because
Well, let me point this out. This was 1973, as you say.
Yeah.
Project Blue Book ended in 1969, and the Air Force stopped investigating UFO sightings at that point, according to all the press releases.
Yeah.
And so we now have a sighting from 1973 that suggests the Air Force took the obviously the diesel engine as opposed to the entire train, but the diesel engine to somewhere in Alabama for an investigation.
Right.
Were you able?
Oh yeah, that wasn't the first time we ran into something like that. There was a case out at NORAD that they had a lockdown, and there were special people brought in. And in 1975, Blue Book was not in business either. So,
well, when you say that they took the train down to Alabama, were you able to find any documentation to support that, or was that just what you were told by the people from the railroad?
I was told that by the accident investigator, or an accident investigator that was privy to what was going on, and he was very cautious about telling me. I wouldn't even be telling you now, except that it happened so long ago that I'm not too concerned about it. But he walked in my place of business and told me that, and I was very surprised. And of course, we'd like to have been able to document it, but it was coming from a very good source.
But he didn't tell you what base in Alabama?
No, but there is a maintenance facility down there. He probably did. He probably told me. But at the time, I wasn't too concerned about that. Should have been.
Well, that's something that strikes me that you, since you bring it up, and we'll get back to this in a moment, but I have noticed that as we all have gotten older, things that weren't important to us then to write stuff down or get information on, things we would routinely do today. We just let things lapse because it didn't seem important at the time. And you're finding the same sort of thing then.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because I can think of a dozen follow-up questions that I would have had that I would have investigated immediately. But I'm looking at it in 2017 after a lot of UFO investigations as opposed to 1973.
Yeah, and also there was a lot going on at the time. We were actually had a reel-to-reel recorder going that was hooked up to the phone, so when the phone rang, you'd pick up the phone and the reel would start up again, and it recorded the whole smear of sightings that were going on. We were getting phone calls left and right, and our equipment here, the MADAR, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the MADAR equipment went off right during the peak of that wave, and right about the time of the time that the NORAD went on, I forget what alert that was because of the Arab-Israeli war. It was just all happening all at once, and I was actually very nervous because I felt like at the time and we weren't really prepared for it. But when I look back, I'm thinking, my God, we did pretty good considering,
Well, we should point out that this wave that you're talking about started in late September 1973 and went through about the first 2 weeks of November of 1973, and there were an awful lot of sightings with the craft on the ground and the craft creatures being seen outside the craft. Yeah. Some of those, I think, one of the cases that I investigated at that time was the Roach Abduction from Utah. And I'm now absolutely convinced now that she had an episode of sleep paralysis based on everything I know today. But back then, it fit into the 1973 wave of sightings. So that was quite an intense period of UFO activity. Whatever the UFO might have been, there was quite a bit of activity. So you were, I guess, investigating sightings in the Indiana area in 1973. Oh,
yeah, we had quite a bit going on locally too. We had, like I said, the phone was ringing off the wall, and do you think, what should I do? How do I follow that up? And about the time you start to think, the phone rings again, and and the sad thing is, a lot of those investigations were conducted through the mail. You would send a form out. You weren't able to just get up and go.
Or Skype with somebody.
Yeah. Or kind of reminds me of Ruppelt and his involvement with the Washington Nationals.
That would be Ed Ruppelt, who was the chief of Project Blue Book at the time. We're going to have to take another break here. Unfortunately, I cannot believe how fast the time goes when we get into this stuff. The website for Francis Ridge is www.nicap.org, and it is a site loaded with information. Some of the Project Blue Book files are listed there, so you can scan some of the earlier files and some of the later stuff as well. The whole thing isn't there yet, but there's an awful lot of good information on the site from a lot of different arenas and a lot of different places, giving you much better information about UFOs than you get on a lot of places on the web. Francis Ridge is hosting that site and has been around UFOs forever. The case that we were kind of talking about, the UFO in Clovis, New Mexico, over the tracks, which got us started on this, is you can find that at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com and how we got involved in all of that. And we will be back right after this.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com.
Hello, I'm Justina Marsh, and with my dad Pete, we are going to present a new show called Too Good to Be True. Together, we are aiming to discover more truths about this world and beyond. Do you have unanswered questions about the world? Do you ever wonder about aliens, conspiracy theories, or the universe? There are many shows discussing subjects such as pyramids or UFOs, but we want to relay this information based on our own research, including from spiritual means. Hopefully, listeners will be helped with their own beliefs and will appreciate the psychic insights that add to the previous research and information. We both look forward to sharing this insight and beginning this journey with our listeners. Visit xzbn.net for more information about when to listen.
Ancient prophecies, legends, and current events indicate we're entering a high-frequency era supporting enlightenment. During expansive times, old rules fail, necessitating access to the ever-shifting currents of life for guidance. There's an ancient form of shamanism through which we can obtain the information we need. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Art School, with a great new provision for those interested in spiritual evolution and personal empowerment. Galactic Shamanism, Art of the Ancients, Key to Tomorrow, is an upcoming series of leading-edge online affordable classes designed to guide and support you and your family during these times of transition. Embrace the magic. Empower your life. Study Galactic Shamanism at findyourpathhome.com.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
I am joined by Francis Ridge, he of the NICAP website at www.nycap.org. We were talking about the UFO wave of 1973 and some of the things going on. You'd mentioned Ed Ruppelt and the 1952 wave of sightings and the anecdote that goes along with that. Fill us in, because I'm sure a lot of people don't understand. I understand it, but I'm sure a lot of people don't understand what you meant, that Ruppelt's there in Washington, D.C. and has to go back to Dayton, Ohio and all of that stuff. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was chaotic here, and the phone was ringing off the wall, and you didn't know what to do, because we would fill out a Form M, which was a half a page message slip, and you'd no more get it half done or done, and you'd lay it aside and the phone would ring again. So you had to decide which ones to go after the next day and how to investigate it. And it was chaotic. And when I brought up the little anecdote about Ruppelt, he was trying to investigate one of the most important sightings of all, and he couldn't even get a flight. I think he had to take a cab. Kevin, you know more about that than I do, but it was ridiculous.
He was actually in Washington, D.C. when the sightings broke, doing something at the Pentagon, and he was scheduled to go back to Dayton, Ohio on orders. And then he read about it in the front page of the newspaper, and he's trying to get permission to stay in Washington, D.C. to investigate. And they're saying, no, if you don't go back to Dayton, you're going to be AWOL. So he had to go back to Dayton, Ohio and I mean, here's the top guy supposedly investigating UFO sightings for the United States Air Force. The sightings are in Washington, D.C. He's there in Washington, D.C. and couldn't get an extension on his orders, which I found out a little bit outrageous. So he's back in Washington, or back in Dayton, trying to gather the information. But I think the other thing is, this is the summer of 1952, and there's just literally hundreds of sightings going on all over the place, and it's the year that the Air Force Project Blue Book collected the most sighting reports, which I think worked out to about 1,500, and of those 303 were unidentified. So it was just a massive wave of sightings at the time. And Ruppelt was trying to get all of this organized and couldn't do it. So he's got to go back to Dayton, Ohio to do his work rather than stay in Washington, D.C., where the investigation should go on. So you're now interested in UFO sightings relating to railroads. So you come across this Clovis, New Mexico thing, and that inspired you to send out an email to the A-Team. And explain a little bit about the A-Team.
Well, they're, as I was mentioning a while ago, these are people that I gathered together over a period of a few years, and they were all my heroes. And I would have never been able to do what I've done with the NICAP site without them, because even though I had clues about this, that, and the other, I needed details, and I needed to know where to go, or go to who knew the answer. So Jan Aldrich was one of the first people that was on the A-Team, and then Don Berliner. And Joe Carpenter, rest his soul, he was always a big help. And then along came Keith Chester with his Foo Fighter expertise, Jerome Clark, Peter Davenport, and then later Paul Dean, who I didn't even know till about 4 or 5 years ago, Tom Dooley, Robert Durant, another one that's no longer with us, Carl Faint. And as you can see, each one of these has a sort of an expertise in Carl.
Well, but I think a lot of listeners don't know who these people are. Jerry Clark's been on the program, so they understand that he's sort of the unofficial historian of the UFO field. Jan Aldrich has been around forever and investigated a lot of stuff, and he's involved in Is he involved with the Sign Historical Group with Barry Greenwood and those guys?
Yeah.
And they're doing historical research into UFOs. Tom Dooley was working with Dennis Stacy, who was one time the editor of the MUFON Journal, and they did a lot of work on the great famous Del Rio UFO crash. That I think they seem to think it was the result of a Civil Air Patrol airplane crashing during the Second World War, as opposed to something happening later. I think it's basically made up by Robert Willingham, but that's a whole nother argument. So, I mean, the people that you mentioned are people who've been around the UFO field, and if you've been around UFOs for very long, you know who the people are and what they've done and what they've accomplished. So you assembled a team of people who had expertise in a great many different aspects of UFOs, but also other areas of expertise. May have been, I don't know, Dennis Stacy, for example, was the editor of the MUFON Journal for a long time. And Jerry Clark, of course, was an editor at Fate magazine, and he was the editor of the CUFOS, International UFO Reporter. So he had a great background in ufology and that sort of thing. So the A-Team is a group of people, and you just sort of blast out these questions to them to see if anybody can answer something about the question. Is that what you do?
Yeah, I got more information out of the A-Team than I did the whole NICAP research team, because the research team is a group of a lot of people that are not as well versed. And in fact, here's Kevin Randall, author, investigator, and researcher in Roswell. You're one of the A-Team. Mark Roediger, Center for UFO Studies. Robert Powell.
The Center for UFO. Roediger is the scientific director of the Center for UFO Studies.
Yes.
And that sort of thing. But I guess the thing that struck me on this latest one, which grabbed my interest right away, was it claimed it was a Blue Book unknown. And Brad Sparks, who had put together a long list of UFO sightings, and a lot of it made up from the Project Blue Book unidentifieds, but there were other things in there that didn't quite fit. And so the first thing I did was I went to my Project Blue Book index, which is in two thick three ring binders, but it's broken down by month, by year, and then month, so it's easy, and sometimes by days, given the number of sightings.
Yours was outdated, the one you were looking at.
Well, no, the Blue Book index is from Project Blue Book, so I looked at that, and there was no listing in it. And then I went back to the Blue Book Unknowns, which was Brad Sparks' thing, and I looked at that. Right. That was outdated. And I said, the numbers don't track here. And then you'd sent something to me. Well, I should point out, and it's maybe a little bit disjointed for the people, but the first thing that they came up was Mike Swords had responded.
Oh, yeah.
And said that the case, the Clovis, New Mexico case, went back to Otto Beiner, who was one of the earliest people involved in UFOs, maybe not the most credible of sources, done a number of books, and that traced back to him, but it didn't trace back any farther. And I looked in Project Blue Book files, and it wasn't there. And so we went on from that point. And then I went back to the Brad Sparks Project Blue Book Unknowns, and I couldn't. I had a different case number. I'm trying to remember exactly the sequence here. And
the reason for that was every time he puts in a new case, it changes the totals, but that's not an actual case number. So.
Well, there was a number associated with it, which I think was 1018.
Yeah, but that wasn't a case number. In other words, if he added 2 or 3 in between there somewhere, that would have boosted that number on his next catalog, so it wouldn't have been a valid number.
But I looked at the date, and there was nothing there, and I got to thinking, well, there's got to be something here, and I found a Blue Book entry in the Blue Book Index from Oceanside, California, which I think Brad may have alerted you to about the same time I discovered it. Is that right? Brad also said that?
Yes.
And so we looked at that case, which is completely different, has nothing to do with Clovis, New Mexico or anything else. Right. But that one is actually in the Project Blue Book files, and it is an unidentified case. So I guess the point of all of this is you put out and all of this is laid out at www.kevinrandall.blogspot.com, and I think it's called the Chasing UFOs, the Oceanside Clovis case. It should be up on the first page when you get to the blog. But it took us about 24 hours to actually answer all the questions.
Oh, yeah, I got a little hairy there for a while, didn't it?
It was very interesting because you had all these people making input, which led us to point A to point B to point C, and we finally got it.
I love it.
And that was the thing that I loved too. Exactly. We did an investigation, all of us sitting in our armchairs, basically, going through documentation that's now available online. Most of the Blue Book files are online. The index is kind of hard to access online. Brad Sparks' documentation and everything else, and we were able to determine that the Clovis case probably doesn't exist.
Right. Now, for someone looking for a case on the NICAP site, there's two ways to do it. You could type some information in a common NICAP and usually go right to it. Or if you know the year, you can go to the chrono, and the date, you can go right to the case and click on it. And then something else I want to point out to our listeners, one of the main things we do is we take a case that's worth presenting, and we have a case synopsis, and we make a directory for that case. And then down below, we have the documents, the actual documents. And we started out, we made some terrible mistakes. We linked to particular documents or web pages that had those documents. And then several years later, those sites went down. So after a while, we learned the hard lesson, and we started making PDF files of everything we do. And that's about where we are now. We've got PDF files for every important case that we've come across or had to redo, and it's a regular mine, gold mine out there, I think.
Do you remove cases from the NICAP site when there's a solution or it turns out to be a hoax, or do you put a note up?
We leave them there because somebody in the future is going to run into it again. And when they find it, they will see that we either rated it low or explained it.
So there's it becomes kind of a footnote to the UFO phenomenon then.
Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah, we've been criticized for putting cases up, but I feel like if someone in the future is looking for a case, even if it's hokey, they've got to find out what our position is on it. And so we leave them up there. However, there were some, as I'm going through 1954 right now, we have found some I'm actually too embarrassed to put up on the site. I mean, they're almost like George Adamski type sightings. And if someone saw a creature and describes something other than the typical alien. There are a list of all different types and shapes, so we will put that up. But if it is really hairy and it's got all kinds of messages and stuff that you would not associate with our system of belief or understanding, I hesitate to even put it on the site.
Well, I was doing a presentation for the local library, and I was going through some of the photographs or drawings, illustrations of creatures. And what struck me and especially from South America, I found the mutant, whatever they called it, in this island Earth, a mutated creature, as one of the aliens. The flying saucer people from Earth versus the flying saucer also appeared in some of the sightings from South America. And you're just thinking, well, I wonder where they got their inspiration for those sightings. Obviously, it was the source was the movie. We're going to have to take another break. I am with Francis Ridge here. His website is www.nycap.org, and you've learned a little bit about how to access it, where it is, and what you can find out about it. We'll learn a little bit more from Francis Ridge when we come back right after this. And remember, if you want to know what happened at Roswell, take a look at Roswell in the 21st century. I need the extra 25 cents for the commission on that. So thank you much. We will be right back after this, so stick around.
The Earth is under ever-increasing pressure from untenable lifestyles and growing populations. Yet, viable answers seem in short supply. What if I told you there's an ancient form that can empower you to take charge of your life? What if your entire family could be enfolded and supported by life itself, finding safe passage through challenging times? I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Art School, with great news: an upcoming series of leading-edge online affordable classes based in an ancient form of shamanism, easily learned and used by your entire family. Galactic Shamanism, Art of the Ancients, Key to Tomorrow are a series of online adult and children's lessons instructing your entire family on natural law, how to cooperate with and be supported by the powers of the universe. Visit findyourpathhome.com to find these unique and powerful classes.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Are you curious? Do you want to learn more about how the world works and have fun at the same time? Study coincidences with me, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, on my Connecting with Coincidence radio show, here on the XZBN network. Listen to Jungians theorize, statisticians randomize, true believers evangelize, while I categorize. I dance to the rhythm of coincidences. People who experience me see more of them. Maybe something on the show matches a thought in your mind. Let us know. Expand your mind to the weirdness happening around you. Synchronicity spoken here, there, and everywhere. For more information, put Connecting with Coincidence in your search engine and find my website, my social media sites, and my blog.
What is truth? Historically, we viewed things as either being true or false. Now, as we enter a more expansive era, we find the question is not, is it true, but rather, how true is it? I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, host of the Science of Magic Radio, a syndicated, internationally broadcast radio program dedicated to uncovering this ever-expanding truth. Join me daily on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, as I interview today's leading experts from the fields of science and magic to uncover the hidden truth between the lines drawn in the sand. What we unearth in our discussions is not only amazing, but totally unprecedented. You won't want to miss a single episode. In service to our listeners, past episodes can always be found on our website with our compliments at thescienceofmagic.net.
As I have said many times, I am joined today by Francis Ridge, he of the NICAP organization, the website, www.nycap.org, which has lots of good information on it. We've been talking UFOs and how the site came about and some of the interesting things going on and what he tries to avoid in putting up on the sites. And I think what you say about having to put up some of the really craziness on the site so people who are looking for information about it can learn something that maybe gives a different perspective about it. Is there some cases that I guess are kind of in the mainstream that you find to be less than accurate that there's quite a bit of information about, or different discussions about?
Not necessarily, but what we try to do is take the ones that we really consider important and put them in a special file, so people don't have to look so hard for the ones that we consider. But what's bad is your debunkers want to know what you think's the best case, so they can make a shooting gallery out of the situation.
Yeah, I've always been hesitant to give a list of the top 10 cases, best UFO cases, simply because mine keeps shifting about. Yeah. And I know that we disagree, I think, on the Mantell incident, that there was the Air Guard pilot who was killed chasing a UFO back in 1948, January of 1948. You seem to think that may have been a real UFO, I guess, a alien spacecraft.
Yeah, the only thing I can say, especially with what little time we have, is to read Brad Sparks' analysis at the end. But Channel 14 wanted to do a story about a local incident, and of course, that wasn't really local for Evansville, but Louisville was fairly close. And I told them that this is not the one we want to do, but they were set on doing that. So the way I did it was, I'm like everybody else. I was considering the case solved a long time ago, and we started a re-investigation. And believe me, within 3 months, it was starting to look a lot different. We found instances of where his wingmen lied to protect themselves, and we have a string of sightings indicating something was going on from Ohio to Kansas City. Something was being observed, and I guess the big thing was the object that was being described was 400 something miles away, and to assume that was the skyhook, and nothing was adding up. In fact, I encourage everybody to read the report.
In defense of the wingmen, I understand why they lied about it, because they'd violated regulations. Regulations at the time said, and I think they still say, you can't fly above 14,000 feet without oxygen. And I don't think people in the 1940s understood how rapidly your cognitive abilities degenerate under the lack of oxygen. I think at 29,000 feet, your active consciousness is like 15 seconds. Yeah. And at 25,000 feet, it's something like 3 minutes. And when you look at the report, you find out that Mantell and his wingmen had been above 20,000 feet for a while, and he said he was going to go up to 25,000 feet and circle for a while and see if he couldn't get any closer. He'd circle for 10 minutes. Well, he didn't have 10 minutes of useful consciousness left by that time, and I think that explains what happened to him.
The only thing I could suggest, because I would have to actually look it over myself to get into more detail, but I would read what Brad said and see what you think. But there was a lot of things that came out that really surprised me, changed my opinion.
And that your report, of course, is available at your website.
Yes.
So they can go to Mantell case and they can read all the evidence that you looked at by then.
Right. It'll be a hardback. I guess not a hardback, a paperback trade copy or something that MUFON's going to put out. They want to produce it.
A trade paperback, I think, is what we refer to it as in the industry for whatever it's worth. But there's been a lot written about Mantell, and I think the Air Force, and by that time it was the Air Force, but he was an Army pilot for the flying I think it was an F-51, and I say that because they were changing the designation of the aircraft, and I think they'd changed it by then. But he wasn't that familiar with the airplane, and I think that's one of the problems we have to look at when you look at the case. He wasn't trained as a fighter pilot. During the war, he was a transport pilot, received Distinguished Flying Cross for his actions during the Normandy invasion, which means he was a valorous man and a very good pilot, but he got into fighters, and I don't think he understood the problems with high altitude operation. And I don't think a lot of people did in 1947, from what I could gather. But that's
what I'd like for you to do, though, if you read Brad's account or his analysis, I would like to know what you think of it afterwards. That'd be pretty cool. But In Brad's defense on the Blue Book, though, I want to point out that even though there was a lot of unknowns that probably didn't belong in the catalog, he ended up with over 1,500 what he considered to be unknowns. And here's a guy that definitely does not believe in ETH at all. He does not believe in aliens at all. And he came up with, well, I think it's 1,700 cases that he considered to be true unknowns.
Well, I think it really doesn't need any defense. When I looked at the Blue Book unknowns, I thought it was just the unknown cases from Project Blue Book, but it clearly goes beyond that. It's other cases as well.
Oh yeah, this should have been listed. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at the Project Blue Book files, and I've said this for decades, that they had a category called insufficient data for scientific analysis, where they threw a lot of the cases, so they kept them out of the unknown category. But there is no solution. Insufficient data for scientific analysis is not a solution. It's merely a categorization, and that kind of gives you a flavor of what Blue Book was doing at the time.
Now, the Blue Book cases on the NICAP site, if they don't have a BBU number, if it just says BBU, that is one that's been placed in the catalog. But if it has a number like 2208, that's the actual case number. So,
and what I should point out here is somebody went through the Blue Book Index and numbered all the cases, starting with 1, going through 12,000 and some. And I'm thinking, I wonder what E4 had to do that and keep track of that.
Without a computer.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a real pain in the butt. But I mean, it's a useful thing. So you can look it up by the date. You can look it by the number. If you have access to the Project Blue Book rolls, you can look it up that way. You don't have all the Blue Book cases on the NICAP website.
No. They are listed. They are actually listed in the chronos. All of them are listed in the chronos, but there may not be links to them. In other words, it would be identical to what you see in the catalog. But if there's a active link there, you can go to the case where we have the synopsis and the documents.
Well, don't you have a part of it that's a Project Blue Book Index, so you can kind of scan some of the Blue Book files?
We use that Project Blue Book website for that. But I usually don't do it. That's why I have others do it. They know how to manipulate it, how to locate files quicker, locate information quicker than I do.
So
plus I'm doing other things. So, I always put it out there, and somebody will, like Brad or Robert Powell, will bring it up and, send me a attached copy of that particular document.
So what you've really done is tapped into kind of a UFO network here that helps you update the project or the NICAP website that keeps things current.
Yes.
And that is helpful for those who are just getting started in UFO research. I think if you're going to look at a UFO case, one of the first places you should start is the NICAP website to see if there's something there on it. But it goes beyond just Blue Book. It's got cases up into the into the 21st century, I should say.
Yes.
Anything you want to add before we go?
The only thing there's a couple things I would add. The 1952 wave that Ruppelt was caught up in, and then the 1973 wave that I was caught up in, those are waves that we thought we were unprepared for, and we're going to wait for the next one. But in the Air Force case, they did have another wave. They had 1957, but I don't think they were more prepared or any better prepared because of the leadership.
And let's not forget the 64, 65, 66, where they had a lot of sightings too.
Yeah.
But by that point, they had the University of Colorado coming in, and they were kind of palming everything off on that. And talking to one of the Blue Book officers at the time, he said that Blue Book was just looking at cases in the Dayton, Ohio area or around Ohio, and other UFO sightings were being investigated by local UFO officers at various Air Force bases, and they may not even get a case file on it.
Right.
Fran, we've run out of time. I can't do any more here. We're just flat out of time. I'd like to thank you for your help.
We can just do it again.
We can do it. We certainly will do it again and talk about the things going on. As I've said many times, it's www.nycap.org. Thank you much, Fran Ridge.
You're welcome.
And for those of you, as I say, there's stuff that appears on my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. And one of the things we were talking about, the Oceanside case, the Clovis, New Mexico case, there's the whole chronology on how that investigation took place over 24 hours. I think he gives you an idea of what all was going on. For those who are interested, I've got a book coming out. It may be out now. It might have been out for 3 days already, called Encounter in the Desert. It's about the Socorro, New Mexico sighting. And it was kind of an outgrowth of discussions I had on the program with Ben Moss, Tony Angiola, and Ray Stanford about the Socorro UFO landing in 1964 with Lonnie Zamore, and some of the things I learned about that, and puts it in a better perspective as opposed to necessarily a different perspective. Also, take a look at Roswell in the 21st century, which will give you a little bit different perspective on the Roswell UFO case. All of that being said, we will return in about 167 hours with another episode of A Different Perspective. So you'll just have to wait for us to come back. Thanks for listening.